Okay, key material from this course to be looking over on your for your final exam. Okay? From chemistry, naming compounds. Okay? And because that is such a fundamental part of being able to do absolutely everything else in that unit. Okay? If you can't write the formulas or names of a chemical compound, then you can't write chemical reactions, you can't do mole equation calculations. It's really bad. So make sure you know how to do this. Okay? You've got lots of worksheets in the worksheet booklet with keys that I posted in Google Classroom now ages ago, but they're still there. Okay? You can go and check your work. I'm not saying do them all. You don't have time for that. Okay? But maybe pick a couple at random. Right? Just try a couple. Make sure you still know how to do it. Okay? There's some multiple choice questions about that. Okay? But obviously it's a big fundamental skill in terms of all the other stuff to do with reactions. Okay? There's a little bit of stuff about history of the atom, but it's pretty minor. It's a couple of multiple choice questions. I wouldn't spend a lot of time going over that. Maybe read over that set of notes once. Okay? And that would be good enough. The big people are Dalton, Rutherford, and de Broglie. Okay? Okay? Dalton because he came up with the whole idea of the atom. Rutherford because he proved the existence of the nucleus, and de Broglie because his is the model we currently use. Okay? Really, that's what's super important, okay, if you needed to know anybody. Okay, the big marks for chemistry. Write, predict, balance. And just like on your unit exam, okay, that was the biggest set of marks on your unit exam, and it probably is the biggest set of marks on the final exam. If we're looking at one concept that has a lot of marks, it would be that one. Okay? So make sure that you can balance a chemical reaction and predict the products and balance a chemical reaction. Because that's what you're going to be asked to do. Last thing from chemistry, mole equation. Okay, got to be able to do mole equation calculations. There are only 4 ways I can ask a mole equation calculation. Okay, so I would, if you're like totally lost on that, go back and just watch any one of the lessons from chemistry that's about moles, because every single day we did moles, I did all 4. Okay, so it would take you literally 15 minutes to see all 4 examples done. Okay, then try a couple from the worksheet booklet, okay, or the final exam review package has a couple on it. Okay, try those, see if you get them right. If you do, you're good. Okay? All right, biology. Okay, cell theory. There's some multiple choice about cell theory. How many points to the cell theory? 3. Everything's made of cells. All living things are made of cells, not everything. All living things are made of cells. Okay, cells carry out the basic functions of the organism, which is probably the most important point, and cells come from the division of existing cells. Okay, in terms of people and places and names, I mean, there were only really 4 people to know. Okay, Hooke, Leeuwenhoek, and Schleiden and Schwann. Okay, again, not super important. There's not a lot of stuff on people. Okay. Modes of nutrition. Okay, it's multiple choice about that. There's another chemoheterotroph, photoautotroph. Okay, why plants have chloroplasts and cell walls and animals don't. Okay, that kind of thing. There's a couple of questions and multiple choice about that. Okay, and then cell structure. There is a diagram of a cell in the multiple choice. You will have to label, okay, or give the function, will depend what the multiple choice questions ask for. So there'll be a picture of a cell, and it might say, what is the function of structure number 5? What is structure number 2? So you have to know names and functions of the parts of the cell.
Will we have to do like on the unit test where it's like a graph and you have to label it?
No.
No?
You have to answer multiple choice questions.
Okay.
So it's not in the written.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. I put it in both. You know what? I changed that test so many times. It's multiple, but I'm going to go over it here.
Okay.
It's in multiple choice. Either way, you have to know it the same, right? Whether you're filling in a chart or whether you're recognizing the answer, you have to know it. So you got to study the parts of what they do. Okay, cell transport. What are the big 3? Osmosis is one. Diffusion. Active transport. Know them, know how they work, be able to recognize when a situation involves them. Okay, it'll be exactly the same as your unit exam. Okay, here's a situation. Which cell transport method is happening? You tell me about that cell transport method, how it works, and why it applies to that situation. Okay. All right. Integrated into cell transport is that whole cell size. Okay, surface area and volume. Okay, that lab we did with the cubes. Okay, you could probably work something in there about that. Okay, plant structure and multicellularity. There's some multiple choice about that. You could probably work it into one of the written response items as well. Okay, understand, you know, like we did layers of the leaf till we were blue in the face, okay, in that unit. So it's probably still that whole idea of specialization, division of labor, all that kind of stuff. That idea, that concept is still very important. It's what separates a multicellular organism from a colony of cooperative cells. Okay, that's why eukaryotic organisms are the only multicellular organisms. Okay, plant transport. There's written response about that because we did a lab on that. Okay, so how does a plant transport materials, that whole thing about osmosis and the polar nature of water, xylem and phloem, okay, that kind of stuff, make sure you know that. There'll be some questions about that in the multiple choice, but also the written. Okay, plant growth and development, so that would be tropisms, that would be hormones, okay, that kind of stuff. There's definitely diagrams related to that stuff on the test, so be able to explain, you know, how a tropism works, okay, identify which of the 3 tropisms we saw would be occurring. In the first half of the physics unit, what was the most important thing? Before we started talking about energy, what was the most important thing?
Scalar electrical.
That's second. What was before that? It involves that. Hmm?
V equals to.
Nope, that would actually be below scalars and vectors. That's energy, so that's the second half. Okay. We did 2 labs on these in the first half of the physics unit because we went over 2 types of them. And you were so traumatized by the whole thing that you have forgotten it all. That's bad because it's big on the final exam. I know you don't want to, but you have to. Okay? There are some big marks on the final exam in regards to graphing. Position versus time, velocity versus time, interpretation, okay, that kind of stuff. There's some multiple choice that are kind of simpler, what's going on in this graph, or a simple calculation. And there's some in the written that's, look, do some big calculations. Y equals mx plus b, you know, area under a velocity time graph, okay, that kind of stuff. Since you've all forgotten that, I would highly suggest over the next couple of days that you review that and try a few examples from the workbook. Okay. So we had graphing. V equals d over t, pretty minor. It's like a multiple choice question that asks you to do scalars and vectors, v equals d over t type calculation. So just keep in mind displacement, velocity are vector, distance, speed, and time are scalar. Okay, treat them a little bit differently, but it's pretty minor. Okay, there's not a lot on that. Acceleration, on the other hand, okay, there could be a multiple choice question that asks you to do an acceleration calculation. Okay, it's part of velocity versus time graphs as well, so it could be worked in there. Okay, so make sure you know how to use this formula. Okay. Obviously for graphing, okay, it could be y equals mx plus b. I changed that graph 4 times, so I don't remember now which one I put on, but since I'm going over it in detail, I will tell you.
Will we get all the formulas?
Yes, what you guys will get is what you got at the beginning of the year, but a fresh one. Have them all copied, but I don't know. Anyway, big periodic table, the 11 by 14. Okay, big one, data on the back, periodic table on the front, in color.
Okay. This is actually going back to chemistry.
Okay.
Do we have to know like soluble versus insoluble like materials?
Again, there's like a multiple choice question or two, but it's pretty minor. Okay, from acceleration, we went into work energy theorem. Okay, there's not much in the multiple choice about that, but there's a problem in the written response to work energy theorem calculation. Okay, so you have to identify as a kinetic or potential, okay, and calculate either speed or height or something along those lines, okay, from that. And after work energy theorem, conservation of energy. Okay, all those roller coaster and sleds going down hills and stuff like that. EI equals EF. Okay, there's one of those in the written response. As your final exam. Okay, and again, I am going to go over the exam in detail, but these are the things that you should definitely go over because they could be covered in both parts of the exam. So you need to know your notes about them as well as be able to demonstrate the skills. Okay, and I don't think if there's an efficiency, it's like a super easy calculation in the multiple choice. I think there is one super easy efficiency thing, but the formula's on your formula sheet. So. Okay. We talked about all the laws of thermodynamics. There is definitely some of that, but I worked it into the Unit 4 stuff a little bit more. So it's like a written response item, kind of like the snow shelter question. Okay. But the thermodynamic stuff kind of gets worked into that a little bit. Remember, second law says heat flows from high to low, hot to cold. Okay. So just know them well enough that you could recognize them or apply them or see when they're working. Okay. That's the big thing for the laws of thermodynamics. Okay, global systems, climate. Like honestly, guys, if it was on your unit exam, it's on the final exam. Okay, so there's going to be a climate question, like the St. John's question. Okay, there's going to be a climatogram, and there'll be a heat capacity problem in the multiple choice. Okay. Okay, climate graph / biomes, and then all the energy transfer stuff. Okay, that'll be soil structure. There's a soil profile question in their multiple choice. Okay, that kind of stuff. All right, that's the quick and dirty review. Okay, for that one. I don't know where to ask questions. I don't even know if anybody's in the live stream. Okay, so that's the stuff you need to kind of go over. Now for the details. Is everybody ready to write these down?
Yep.
Okay, and I'm not trying to trick you here. Okay, because I did this with my physics 20s yesterday, and they're like, yeah, right, you're gonna tell. Yes, I am. Okay, I am telling you what's on the final exam, and I'm doing that because you are pressed for time, and I want you to be able to study the stuff I'm going to assess. I don't want you to waste time on stuff that isn't going to be assessed. Okay, study the stuff that I'm telling you is going to be on there, so you can demonstrate to me how good you are at it. Yeah? Okay. Okay. There are 50 multiple choice, but 2 of them are being omitted, so there's actually only 48. Okay, because 2 of them had to do with things that we skipped in Unit 4. Okay, so there are actually 48 multiple choice questions. And there are 14 written, because I omitted the last one, which was actually a pretty big one and was pretty time consuming. So we didn't go over heating curves, so it got taken out. All right, so multiple choice stuff. Okay, and by the way, guys, the test goes sequentially. All chemistry questions, all bio questions, all physics questions, all global systems questions. So if you got a favorite unit, you can start on it. Okay, they're not random throughout the test. You're not going to have to jump all over the place. Okay, it's set up so that you can get into a frame of mind, do all the chemistry, do all the physics. Okay, so it's set up that way. So like I said, it's, history of the atom. Okay, I told you which 3 guys are important, so make sure you know them. Okay, atomic theory. There's 4 points. Be able to recognize them. You're not going to be asked to write them out, but be able to recognize them. Okay. Ionic and molecular compounds, like properties of compounds. There's some multiple choice about that. Okay, Kevin, I think you asked about solubility, and there's a couple of solubility questions. Okay, we already said there's naming on there. Naming. Okay, see, there's like 5 naming questions. And then there's a couple of identify the reaction type multiple choice questions. Of course, you have to be able to do that to predict the products of a reaction, so that's a skill you gotta have. Okay, so there are in total 16 multiple choice on chemistry, so exactly 1/4 of the chemistry question, of the multiple choice questions are chemistry. Okay, for bio. Yeah, labeling this cell and knowing the parts of the cell. Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 questions on that. diagram is super clear, okay, so you won't have any trouble with that. And then there's plant transport, parts of the plant, plant growth and development, hormones, tropisms, and multicellularity. There are 11 multiple choice questions on the biology. Okay, physics. There's some energy, like thermodynamics, mechanical energy, kind of questions. Thermodynamics, there's a graph. There's another graph. Another graph, and another graph. And then there's an acceleration question, and then there's a scalar vector question. And V equals D over T question. And there's 2 efficiency questions in the multiple choice. Okay, so there's simple calculations. And it looks like 12 questions. Sorry, I did that calculation wrong. It wasn't a quarter, it was a third. 16 times 3 is 48, 16. 1/3 of the multiple choice questions are finished. Okay, 12 questions on physics, so 1/4. That's 1/4 of 48. Okay. Holy crap! I need more coffee. That's an easy math question. Okay, and then the last we're looking at 8 questions are going to be from global systems and their soil horizons, biome, climate, water cycle, heat transfer, and there's a specific heat capacity calculation, exactly like the one on your unit exam. All right, and that is that. Now, written response. Ready? Okay, written response, question number 1. 3 reactions to be balanced. Okay, so the reaction is written out, there's blanks in front of each compound. Balance the reaction, there's 3 reactions. Okay, so actually, it looks a lot like your unit exam did, right? First we started off with a balance, and it was like 7 reactions to balance, and the unit exam was only 3 here.
So is that 3 out of the 16?
No, this is written response now.
Oh, yeah, okay. Oh.
Okay, the 16 was the multiple choice.
Oh, yeah, so is it 3 out of the 14 written? Or
Three
is
out
that
of the-
one
no,
out of the
this
14?
is question number 1,
Okay.
A, B, C.
Okay.
Yeah? Okay, so question number 1 is out of 3 marks, 1 for each reaction. Okay, question number 2. Write out the reaction, identify the type, and balance. You don't have to predict for question number 2. Okay, so there's 2 reactions, write it out, balance it, and identify the type. Okay, each one is 4 marks. So there's 1 mark for the reactants, 1 mark for the products, 1 mark for it being balanced correctly, 1 mark for the reaction type. Okay. So question number 2 is out of 8 marks. Okay, and then question number 3, I give you only the reactants, write, predict, balance. Okay, that's also 8 marks, because there's 2 reactions. And question number 4 is 2 mole equation calculations, A and B. One of the questions involves using Avogadro's number. Okay, remember there's 4 ways I can ask you a mole equation question, I'm asking you 2 of them. Okay, one of them will involve using Avogadro's number.
Are we giving his number?
Yep, it's on the sheet. Okay, so that's it for chemistry. So in chemistry there are 8, 16, 24, 27 marks. Out of 79. Okay, there's 27 marks out of the 79 marks in the chemistry. Sorry, gotta get back to where I was. Okay, unit 2, so biology. You have a question that asks about how materials are transported, how and where they are transported in a plant. 6 marks. It's the same as what I asked on your unit exam. Okay, that's a 6-mark question. 3 marks for water, 3 marks for sugar. Yeah. Okay, question number 6. Cellular transport. Okay, so you will have to figure out which of the big 3 is happening, explain how that process happens, okay, and then kind of talk about the situation, the context of the question itself. 5 marks. Okay, and then there is a cellular transport / plant transport question. Okay? And if it's about plant transport, it's pretty obvious which cellular transport process is important. Okay? It's only out of 4 marks. And then there's a question about, so question number 8 is about surface area, cell size, cell transport, diffusion. And it's a 5-mark question, so 20. So 20 of the 79 marks are for bio. Okay, and then we start physics. Question number 9 is a physics question. It is a work energy theorem question. We did, I don't know how many questions just like question number 9. So if you're going through your notes, you'll have examples of this, countless examples. Okay. And then question number 10 is a graphic question. In this graph, you will not be required to do any calculating. You will be asked to interpret the graph. The graph has 3 sections, and you will be asked to describe what is going on in each of the 3 sections. It's out of 5 marks, so make sure that you're detailed when you're talking about the sections. Don't just say, it's this, and stop, okay? Make sure that you talk about it quite a bit, okay? So, let's say you say, in section A, the object is accelerating. That might be right, but how detailed is that? Not very. What if you said, it's accelerating in a negative direction? Would that be better? Yes, that would be more detailed, okay? So, think about that when you're doing that question, okay? Don't just say one thing. If there's something else you could say that would help describe that motion, say it.
But it wouldn't necessarily be like 2 sentences to describe it, right? Like you're more likely to just be like, this is accelerating like negatively at this speed or something?
Yeah, something like that. Yep, that would be good. Okay, question number 11 is an acceleration problem. And question number 12 is your conservation of energy question. It is a roller coaster. .21 marks of the 79. Okay, then for unit 4, question number 13 is like the Quincy question on your exam. Okay, it's a heat transfer question. Okay, it's a situational one, just like that one was. Okay, so on your unit exam, you had the question that was about how does this, snow structure keep you warm? Use the 3 methods of heat transfer. Okay, this is very similar, just a different context. Talk about 3 types of heat transfer, and how they would work in that situation, or how you would prevent them if it's a prevention thing, or how you would harness them if it's a harnessing thing. Okay, that's what that one's about. And it's 6 marks. Okay, it also has a little bit of thermodynamics. There's probably, if you talk about the laws of thermodynamics, that would probably be that last mark, because your one on your exam, your unit exam is out of 5, this one's out of 6. And look in the laws of thermodynamics for that. Just putting it out there. Okay, number 14 is your climatogram question. Just like your unit exam. Here's a climatogram, tell me what biome it's from and why. Okay, so you get marks for describing the climate graph. Make sure you look at scale. Okay, scale's important. Okay, remember that, 40 millimeters of rain is not very much, but between 60 and 80 is, quite a bit more than that. It's twice as much. That's a lot better. Okay. All right. And that's it. There's only those 2 questions for unit 4. So unit 4 has 11 marks out of the 79. Yeah.
For the climatogram, it's going to be fairly obvious as well. It's not going to be, or is it not? Like this exam, the last unit test, it's going to be fairly obvious with that one?
It's obvious to me.
It's not
I don't know if it's going to be obvious to you. It's a climatogram. If you've studied your biomes and you know how to interpret a climatogram, I think it should be obvious, but then by that stretch, all of them should be. When I look at a tropical rainforest climatogram, I should know right away. It's obvious. There's flat line and really high flat precipitation bars. I think they're all obvious, so I'm maybe not the best judge of that.
Okay. And then also, because you said there's going to be something about looking on the map, kind of in describing the climate, so that's not really in the written response.
It's
more
not really,
choice.
no, it's more multiple choice.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's just to do with factors affecting climate. The factors affecting climate stuff has been moved from multiple choice for the final. Okay, that's what's on there. So you know exactly what you have to look at now, okay, over the next few days. Okay, and I know there isn't a lot of time, that's why I did what I did. Okay, we now know exactly what stuff you have to study, how much you have to study it. Okay, obviously, I wouldn't spend much time studying Unit 4. You already did. Okay, you just had an exam on it, and I told you I'm testing on the written response 2 of the exact same things as were on your unit exam. So I wouldn't spend a lot of time studying Unit 4. It's still pretty fresh in your mind. Okay, I would spend time studying chemistry because it was a long time ago, and it's slightly more weighted than everything else. It just worked out that way. I tried to make everything pretty even. Obviously not unit 4. I made absolutely no effort to make unit 4 even, but the other 3 are pretty even. Okay, so you know, definitely go over chemistry. There's a lot of marks there. Okay, and remember for bio, like you guys knew your bio stuff, but the reason you didn't do as well as you would have liked was level of detail. So remember, level of detail is important when you're writing your answers on the final exam. Okay, and bio is basically going over your notes. Okay, thinking about the ways I ask those questions. Okay, thinking about what kind of things you need to write. And then for physics, it's practice. Okay, you know you have to practice it. A conservation of energy question, a work energy theorem question, and a acceleration problem. Okay, and then you got, you know, the interpreting the graph. But right, it's, you know, you have to do those things. Okay, make sure you go over problems like that as your practice. Okay, really streamline your studying. Okay, don't study anything that's not going to be there. Right, don't do a whole bunch of V equals D over T questions. Right? There's 1 in the multiple choice. It's 1 mark. Okay, out of what, 120 something. Okay, that's not worth spending much time on. Okay, so as we said, you guys, you're writing next door in Mr. Dickey's room. Okay, so that's where you need to show up on Thursday. Be here for 8:45. Okay, you'll probably get let in around 10 to 9. Make sure you've got some pencils, some pens, calculator. If your calculator is one of the big graphing ones, make sure it's got fresh batteries or bring an extra set with you. Okay, because this happens a lot. When I'm coming around to clear the calculators and I hit the clear, it goes low battery. If it says low battery, I can't clear it. So your calculator goes in my pocket. I go around and clear all the other calculators. Then I wait for someone to bring me batteries because I can't leave the room while I'm supervising. And sometimes that takes a while. Then I get the batteries, then I clear your calculator, and then I put your dead batteries back in it because you're not getting a free set of batteries. Okay? Put your dead batteries back in after I clear it, and then I give your calculator back to you. If it were me, that would stress me right out. Okay? I'm sitting here, I'm looking at a final exam, and Mr. Coderre has my calculator. I know I can't do any of the questions that involve my calculator. No, I don't want that for you. Okay? Put new batteries in. You don't even need really good ones. Just as long as they're new, you can go to the dollar store and get 4 AAA batteries. Okay? Just make sure you got ones that are not going to die on you. Okay? In the test, because that would be stressful.
This is just kind of a general question, but for the other exams too, are they all 2 hours you get?
I think so. Maybe your English ones might be different. You have to talk to your English
But
teacher.
math would be the same?
Math is, yeah, unless your teacher, is saying you can have, it's a 2.5. Like some teachers do that. We love supervising those ones because they're an extra half an hour. Okay, but yeah, mine's 2 hours. But you have to talk to your individual teachers. As far as I know, they should all be 2, but some people give extra time
Okay.
because they're nicer than me.
How do you clear the memory on your calculator?
To clear the memory on your calculator, okay, and I'll come around and do it, or I'll put a sheet on your desk that has the detailed instructions. You go second, and then you hit the plus button where it says memory, and then you get this screen, and you hit 7 for reset, and then you have to scroll over to all, and then you hit 1, and then it asks if you're sure, and you say yes by hitting number 2, and then it says resetting all, and then it says this, mem cleared. Okay? If you do it wrong, it'll say RAM cleared, and then I'll have to do it again, because that only clears the RAM, which you can do by shutting it off. Okay? We have to make sure all of the memory is clear. Now, when you do that, it does put it back into its default mode, which is radians, which for us doesn't make any difference. But if you're doing any trig, it makes a huge difference. So after you reset it, you need to go over to where it says radian, go back to degree and hit enter. Because, well, if you don't do that and you're doing any trig, you're going to get it all wrong.
If you just have the
basic scientific calculus?
then I won't be doing anything to it.
Okay.
If it doesn't have storage capability, it doesn't need to be reset.
Okay.
So just the graphing calculators. Okay. All done?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, so that's how that would work. Okay, and yeah, you have to stay for 1 hour. Okay, remember that. But after 2 hours, the exam is done, so you can't stay longer than that. If you have an allocation for extra time through learning support, obviously that will be provided to you. If you usually write in a separate setting, that's also going to be provided. All the same things that apply to all your other tests do apply. Okay. Now, if for some reason you are not able to get here for the final exam, we'll do our best to reschedule it. But if that's not possible, then we have to go on kind of a case-by-case basis, okay, for what will happen. So we don't have a blanket policy for what happens if you miss the final exam. So it'll be done on a case-by-case basis.
Would it be possible to get a 0 on it if you just couldn't make it?
If you have a medical reason or something like that for missing it, no. Like, I think I've only given a 0 on a final exam maybe 3 times in 22 years. Okay, once for cheating, and twice because the kid just didn't show up. Okay, didn't show up, didn't write it, don't get credit for the course. Okay, and then this was just like I outright refused to write the test, Mr. Codere. Yeah. So, if you're sick, you get COVID and have to isolate, and I can't get you back here to write it, then we have to figure something out. Sometimes that might be that you have to write it second semester at some point. Okay, like I said, it's going to be a case-by-case basis. Okay, and we'll have to cross that bridge when we get there. I guess basically do everything you can to be here, but if you have to stay home because you're sick, obviously stay home and we'll work it out. Okay, we'll make it work no matter what. Okay, but remember, it's an opportunity, right? Like to write that exam, it is worth 10% of your final mark regardless, but it can also replace your lowest unit exam, which is a big deal. Okay, if your lowest unit exam was 72 and you get 87 on the final, it's a big deal. Okay, the final at 10% is worth about the same amount as a unit exam. Okay, when it comes down to it, okay, each one of those unit exams is worth like 8%. So, yeah, it's a big deal. All right, questions from you guys? We got a little bit of time. Is there anything you want me to go over?
Graphing?
Graphing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Graphing in general.
Graphing in general. Okay, so remember, we went over 2 kinds of graphs: position versus time graphs and velocity versus time graphs. Okay, so if I have a position versus time graph and it looks like that, what is that object doing? It's moving forwards at a constant velocity. That would be how I would expect it to be described in, say, a question about describing what's going on a graph. Okay, that's the level of detail I would be looking for. If you say constant speed, I'm going to go, 1. Okay, certainly that's not worth 2. Okay, so there's going to be interpretation stuff. Okay, there could also be, like I said, some calculating, being able to calculate slope, okay, or recognizing what does the slope represent on this graph. Okay, so if we go back to this, okay, if I calculate the slope of this graph, what am I calculating? Don't say the slope of the graph. Velocity. Right, I'm calculating the velocity when I calculate the slope because on the y-axis, y minus b will be my displacement or my change in position, and x is my time. Okay, that's the kind of thing we have to be able to figure out. Okay, there could be questions like that. Okay, even in the multiple choice. Being able to calculate distance traveled, okay, stuff like that. There could be some multiple choice about that, but as we said, in the written response, it's simply an interpretation question. Okay, so it's actually pretty easy compared to what you had to do on your unit exam for graphing. Okay, because on your unit exam, you had one position and one velocity, and they both involve calculating, heavy calculating. Okay, the calculating to do with graphs on your final is much less. Okay, so concentrate on the stuff I told you to concentrate on. Okay, work energy theorem, acceleration, conservation of energy. Okay, then for a velocity versus time graph, so if I have a velocity versus time graph, I've got meters per second, and I've got seconds, and okay, what's the object doing there?
It's moving at a velocity.
Moving forwards at a constant velocity or in a positive direction. Or maybe it went meters per second and it had north beside, then you would say moving north at a constant velocity of, and you'd probably use the graph to figure out 5 meters per second or whatever it is. Okay, what's it doing here?
Accelerating negatively.
Accelerating negatively, I would even accept the object is slowing down, okay? If it went down to 0 and the line didn't go any further, you could say coming to a stop, okay? That would be sufficient. That is what it is doing, okay? But I would say, you know, its velocity is changing negatively or it's accelerating negatively. Those would be good answers, okay, for something like that. All right, if I wanted to calculate the total displacement, remember that's going to be average velocity times time. That's the area between the line and the x-axis. Okay, that kind of stuff.
Well, we have to figure out like the area of the line when it's like doesn't touch 0, like when it starts at like another thing. No.
My philosophy on final exams is that's not where I ask the hardest questions.
Okay.
I did that already. I asked you hard questions on your unit exam. Okay? My final exam is to check and make sure you can still do the stuff I showed you. Okay? Not can you still do the hardest one I showed you. So, yeah, I'm not going to have them. It wouldn't be nearly as difficult as the one you had on your unit exam. Okay? That's what you need to know about graphing. That's what you have to be able to do for your final. Okay? Obviously, if you take physics 20, we're going back to calculating and stuff like that. It's going to be important there. Okay, what else?
Mole equation.
Mole equation. Yeah, figured. Okay.
Especially the ones with like.
That's what I was going to do with Avogadro's number.
Yeah.
Okay. So this would be the toughest of the 4 mole equation questions. Okay? We want to calculate the mass of 6.92 times 10 to the 25 molecules of lithium oxide. So I know the number of molecules. And I know the material is lithium oxide. What does that look like? Okay, what do I have to do? What kind of compound is this? Okay, so what do I do with ionic compounds? All right, I got drop and swap, right? This is a +1, this is a -2. Okay, this is where people mess up a question like that. They mess up the easy part. Okay, they just write LiO and they get going on it instead of, oh right, this is an ionic compound, I got to drop and swap. Okay, and then they get the molar mass wrong. So 6.94 times 2 plus 16. Okay, so 29.88 grams per mole. Okay, so the mole equation looks like this. Number of moles equals mass divided by molar mass. I've got molar mass. I'm looking for little m, mass. I don't have n yet. How do I get n? Number of molecules divided by Avogadro's number. Okay, so n equals 6.92 times 10 to the 25. That's the number I have, divided by Avogadro's number, which is the number of molecules in 1 mole. Okay, so molecules divided by molecules per mole leaves me with moles. Make sense? Okay. Okay, so we'll have our 6.92 E25 divided by 6.02 E23. All right, so it's 114.95 moles. Okay, now I've got N and big M. Can I find little m? Yes, but I have to manipulate, right? Which now for you guys is nothing. When we started looking at that, it was like so hard. Now it's not. Okay, so N equals little m over big M. So I multiply both sides by big M. All right, then I punch in my numbers. 114.95, no, that was, sorry, that's N. Number of moles is 114.95 times 29.88. Okay, so that's big M times N, and it'll be 3,434.71 grams. Okay, that's the toughest. Maybe the one on your unit exam is like that one. Okay, and then obviously the ones that don't involve Avogadro's number just involve using the mole equation. Okay, you're finding either N or little m. Okay, you always have big M because you can always get it from the periodic table. Okay, anything else? Okay, here's some little tips for you. Okay, these are the simple things that you can do to be ready on exam day. Okay? Hint number 1, get a good night's sleep. Okay? Pulling an all-nighter will not help you. Okay? Get a good night's sleep. Hint number 2, have a good breakfast. Okay? And be well hydrated. Your brain needs sugars and it needs fluids if it's going to work properly for you, and you're going to be comfortable while writing an exam. Okay? If your blood sugar starts to drop, your brain doesn't work right. Okay? You ever get hangry? Know somebody who does? I do. Okay? Like I can't think and I am a miserable you know what, okay, if my blood sugar starts to drop. Okay? So don't be that person. Okay? That would suck if you're in the middle of writing a final exam and suddenly your blood sugar drops and you can't process. Okay? So make sure you get a good breakfast, bring a snack, exam appropriate, okay? And something to drink, some water, okay? Something like that. Black coffee and cigarettes is not a good breakfast, okay? So make sure you are well fed and well hydrated, okay? And here's the last tip, and it's gonna seem counterintuitive, but it's so true. Stop studying for the test 2 hours before. People have this idea that if they study right up till the second they're allowed into the exam, that that's a good thing. And they're so wrong. Okay? Because what you're doing in that last bit of time is cramming material into your short-term memory. And your short-term memory is exactly that, short-term. It lasts between 5 and 10 minutes, which means you'll be told, come into the exam, you have to put your books away, and 10 minutes later, you get to start. And that's when you get the sensation of blanking. Anybody ever had that sensation? Yeah. That's why you get it. It's because you had a whole bunch of stuff in your short-term memory and your brain went, time to clear, and it's gone. Okay? And then you panic. And that's not the way to start a test. Okay? So don't do that. Okay? Stay away from the cramming idea. And I guess there's one more thing. Do what you're confident in first. Okay? Read through the test and highlight the questions you are sure of and do them first. It always feels good to do the ones you're sure of, okay? And that sets you up for the rest of the test, okay? You start feeling confident, you start feeling better about what you're doing, okay? And then you can tackle the ones that you're less sure about later, okay? And you know what? If at the end, there's still a question you didn't know how to do, at least it's just that question, right? The worst thing you can do is sit on a question and let the question you can't do keep you from doing the ones you can do, okay? That's simple logic, but I see it happen all the time. Somebody reads a question, they don't know how to do it, and they sit there and stare at it until they're nearly in tears, okay? And then it's 20 minutes later, and they've accomplished nothing. Okay? If you can't do a question within 30 seconds of reading it, move on. It will still be there later. And one of the other questions on the test might give you a hint. It might trigger something. It's like, oh, right, that's how we do that question. Then you come back to it. Okay? But don't let it eat up your time. Do the questions you're sure about. Okay? You don't have to do the test in order. You have to put the answers on the multiple choice sheet in order. Okay? But you don't have to do them in order. Okay? So keep that in mind. Okay? I never do a test in order. Okay? Even when I'm making the key, I don't do it in order. Okay? So you don't have to do it in order. Do the ones you're sure of first. Okay? Always a good idea to do it. Yeah, that's what I can tell you. Okay? It's okay to be nervous. Okay? If you weren't nervous, I'd worry about you. Okay? But you don't need to be scared. Okay? There's a very fine line between anxious and scared. Okay? Anxious is okay. Okay? Anxiety can be a motivator, and you should feel anxious about a final exam. Okay? Even if you're well prepared, you probably will feel anxious. Okay? High-level athletes, who go into competitions, they're confident in their skills, they're good, at their sport, but they're still going to be anxious. Okay? That's okay. Anxious is okay. Like terrified, that's bad. There's no need to be terrified. This is a final exam. It's not the end of the world one way or the other. Okay? It's just something you have to face. And the more often you face those kinds of things, the better you get at facing them. Okay? So don't be scared. There's nothing to be scared of. Okay? Let the anxiety be a motivator, not a distractor. All right. Thanks for a good semester, guys. It's been a pleasure to teach you. Okay? I was very impressed by you guys, especially given what you guys have had to go through the last 2 years, like what you came with and what you were willing to do, okay, to get caught up. I was very proud of you for that.